Most United Methodists around the world are familiar with John Wesley's famous statement, "The world is my parish." And in this introductory and first section of the course, we're going to look at the life of John Wesley from the cradle to the circumference of the earth, and the Wesleyan movement tracking that journey. Literally from Epworth, the place where John Wesley was born here in Great Britain, to everywhere, from Epworth to everywhere. That's really the journey that we all want to take together in this course, DS 511. The world is our parish, and really that's the trajectory you would expect for me to do, to read the life of John Wesley as a missionary life, with my missionary background as a professor in Liberia and Eastern Europe. This is how I read John Wesley. A word is in order about this first PowerPoint, The Wesley Show. It's taken from a comic book that was developed by the German Methodist Church for their main seminary in Frankfurt. And this comic book is designed to bring the history of Methodism into a medium that is easy to understand cross-culturally. I used this as one of our texts when I was working in Eastern Europe, based in Austria, working with students from Hungary, former Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Slovenia, etc. We use this, and it's in the German language, and I'll try to make some translations and some comments along the way. But you'll understand now when you see the German, I've done the translation and hard work for you. I find it a very historically accurate account. This used to be called CH 550, History of United Methodism. But when we look at the life of Wesley, it really spans the entire 18th century, and Wesley goes from being one of the more reviled religious enthusiasts of his era to becoming, at the end of his life, one of the more respected and certainly one of the most famous persons in Great Britain, because his movement had spread and revitalized many of the churches in Great Britain. Wesley did not set out to create a Methodist church or even a movement. He didn't sit down one day and critique the theology of the Church of England. He experienced some divine dissatisfactions along the way with the standard theology, and recognized in his own dissatisfaction some failings in Anglicanism, but he never left the Anglican Church, and he always loved it. Indeed, was fond of saying that it was the greatest national church of any churches in the world. So Wesley didn't sit down and create the movement like an artist creates a picture, or paints a picture, or an author writes a book, but he was impressed by many revival ideas and activities that had been going on for really over 100 years prior to that great experience that we all know of, the Wesleyan warmed heart at Aldersgate. In fact, this was a transnational religious movement that some of the roots had begun in German Pietism, a reform movement within the Lutheran Church, and Wesley was also influenced by many other theological ideas. He responded to his encounter at Aldersgate and his organization and his missionary preaching on the frontier of Britain, and even in America in an early period, which we'll see, transformed Britain with a revival that lasted for over 50 years, which is rare in the history of Christianity. His message really broke down the stratified class structure. The Church of England in the 18th century was more effective at reaching stable rural parishes. It had been organized to run along parish or county lines. The church did, and in the 18th century, a lot of rapid demographic shifting was happening throughout Great Britain, and the Anglican Church was not able to reach the new industrial working class very effectively, nor was it able to reach the upper class at the period. But Wesley's message was applied and offered to all classes. Repent and flee the wrath to come. A totalist message of Christ dying for all humanity. God's love can be experienced in totality by all persons of every race, gender, and ethnicity, and that the image of God can be completely restored in all. So it was a completist message. All who would accept the gift of salvation by grace through faith could have God's image restored in them. The movement was notable for allowing awakened believers to be gathered into an organized network of small groups called classes, and these classes were later linked into larger urban and rural connections, classes, circuits, societies, etc. And the Wesleyan revival existed as a symbiotic stimulation for the Church of England during the time of Wesley's life, and only became independent after Wesley's death. Wesley's life was deeply marked by his parental influences of his father and mother. Here's a picture of Susanna Wesley, his mother. We'll look at her life in some detail shortly. Certainly his Puritan streak, which was imbibed from his mother, was a noted aspect, particularly of his early life, but remained with him throughout. He was raised the son of an Anglican priest, Reverend Samuel Wesley, who himself had engaged in much reform, and we'll look at and track their life a little bit more. From Samuel Wesley, John Wesley received a strong high church Anglican king and country sensitivity that helped him achieve early success as a talented priest and professor, Oxford Don, in his early life. So Samuel had originally been a Puritan dissenter, as Susanna had, and had reconverted back to the Anglican Church, and attempted in some ways to work his way up the chain through research and writing, obtaining patronage from the Queen, etc. And so Wesley, with his father and mother, both being the sons of and daughter of multiple generations of clergy, really received a great ministerial upbringing within his life as a child in the Epworth parish and in the home of Samuel and Susanna. They both had a great influence upon them. Here are some pictures of Susanna here on the right, a different kind of portrait than the earlier one. And here is a portrait, the Reverend Samuel Wesley, John's father, taken from the frontispiece of one of his published books. He was a poet, a fair poet, not an exceptional poet, somewhat better scholar. He wrote a scholarly treatise on the book of Job and dedicated it to the Queen and obtained some mild support and patronage. On the left here you have Samuel's father, the Reverend John Wesley, with the T being dropped off for Samuel, who was also a dissenting pastor and had many difficulties in ministry, being a prophetic criticizer of the Church of England. Samuel comes back into the Church of England. Susanna herself also comes back into the Church of England after growing up in a part of London where her father, the Reverend Samuel Annesley, a famous Puritan, nonconformist, non-Anglican preacher, preached here in Little St. Helens for many years in the Bishopsgate area of London. You can see Samuel Annesley lived not too far away at the Spittal Yard where Susanna was born. And so she grew up with great theological earnestness and training from her father, and she passed on this training to John as well. You can see from the map in my book, Historical Atlas of the Methodist Movement, the family tree. You really don't need to go through the whole family tree, but on the Wesley side, there were members of Parliament, very famous preachers, and noble persons, and Samuel started out his ministry, this is John's father, as a curate in London's St. Andrew's Parish down here. In 1688, the year he and Susanna marry, he moves down, or up rather, into Lincolnshire, to the South Ormsby Parish in 1691, and then moves to the Epworth Parish in 1697 and stays here until his death. A very long ministry. So you can see here the map of England. Wesley also had some Irish relatives, the Wesleys and the Welsleys, different lines of the family tree, and you can see here their various family journeys. This is the parish church here that John's father Samuel served for roughly 38 years, St. Andrew's Church of England Parish in Epworth. This is the old rectory where both John and Charles Wesley were born. And this was the site of the homeschooling that Susanna Wesley worked with such great effect to raise John and Charles and their oldest brother, indeed, Samuel, the oldest brother, into an education that would serve them well in ministry. Here is a portrait of the February 1709 arson that set fire to the rectory. Samuel Wesley, John's father, was a strong king and country man. His politics didn't sit well with the politics of this area of Lincolnshire, the Epworth area, which was much more positive, or much less positive, towards the king and high church politics, the elite. It was much more populist in religion, and because Samuel probably was trying to overcompensate from his father's oppression and ill treatment, indeed being thrown in jail for his dissenting anti-Church of England ideas, Samuel probably overcompensated and preached a